All right, first question today. Do we have any new Ollie members here today? Oh, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, look at them all. Yay, okay. Well, just so you know, welcome to Ollie, all of you. I would certainly appreciate it. You are certainly in for a large treat today with this class because it's an excellent class. There is a first-time sheet out front. If you did not have a chance to sign that sheet, first-timers, if you would please do so. I believe they're going to throw a big party for all the first-time people, and you would, of course, then be invited. And then also, if you don't have a name tag, you will need to contact Ollie via email at ollie@auburn.au. I don't even know what it is, something here. But anyway, it's ollie@auburn.edu. I was close. All right, so please contact them, and then you'll get a name tag, and then you can be official. See, because you got a name tag. So. The other thing I would like to do for you first-timers is I'm going to apologize in advance for my behavior. Because quite honestly, it's generally not good. So, first thing of regular order of business today is turn off your cell phones. If you do not know how to turn off your cell phone, I will be having a remedial class next semester on how to mute your cell phone button. So if you do need that skill set, I can gladly help you with that in my class next semester. Wear your name tags, okay? Remember to check your roster, put your name down, do all those things, all right? Tomorrow at the AU bookstore, you can get books that you might need for your classes from 10 a.m. till noon. Tomorrow, Wednesday, also right here on this stage, we are going to have a very special Wisdom Wednesday. That is from 2:30 to 4, and that is the economic impact of climate change with David Newton. I just read today in the paper that the insurance claims so far from the wildfires in California have now reached $11.4 billion. So if you are expecting a reduction in your insurance premiums, do not hold your breath. And also, starting next week, we have the Advisory Council nominations. They will open next week. They are to be submitted in paper only, and only one nomination per person, and nomination forms and envelopes will be in each classroom. Now, please keep in mind, this is an extremely important thing because the committee has very, very important work, and I do not want any more spurious write-ins. Last time we had a lot of Daffy Ducks, so I don't want any of that going on. So please, serious ones only. Now, from what I understand today, and if you have not gotten one, there is a syllabus out on the table out there. In fact, Mr. Mike right there has syllabuses for you if you need them. We are going to be discussing primarily the topic of feudalism. And there's a lot of connotations and different interpretations of what feudalism is. Now, I tend to lean towards the Karl Marx version being relatively interesting because, quite honestly, the Karl Marx version sort of reminds me of the mafia shaking down a store owner for protection. So I can just see it, yo, serf, them Vikings, they could come down here any day now. And with all that raping and pillaging, well, you might need some protection. So if you give us all the profits from your growing food on the land, if them Vikings show up, forget about it. So, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce the godfather of history, Joey the medievalist Kicklighterino.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And welcome back, respectively. And let me say, every week you have that to look forward to. You will never know I have tried over a couple of years now to figure out where he's going, but I'm never sure. So that is the magic that is Frank. So, and his introductions, it is incredible. It is, in fact, going to be the central Middle Ages, or High Middle Ages, as some would say. And as you'll note on the syllabus, we are continuing with the same book simply because it's so available in used copies and so easy to get on Amazon or other websites. And as a result, with an 11th edition, she's got to be doing something right. So I think it's very, very important to understand that in terms of bringing it all together in what, about 350 pages, for all of those centuries is quite a monumental task when it's not what sometimes in academics we call popular history, but this is truly academic history. And yet it's quite good. There are maps, there are tables, all of it is included. I don't think there are any color shots, but there's some black and white. So you get it all right here in what was probably done in the 1960s, starting out, the first edition. That's how old it is. It's just continued its life. Very, very happy about it. And I know that the first author and the current author both would agree with me in saying, yes, Frank, feudalism is a serious issue as we start. Oh, yes. We worry about feudalism a lot. This is where we are starting. You will remember, some of you, that when we ended, it seemed like so long ago when we were together. What was it, November of 2018? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, this is really, in terms of, I hope you haven't forgotten everything. Remember, knowledge is for a lifetime. So there will be a little review quiz, but I don't want anybody to feel that you're being picked on. But I do want you to understand that by 900, a lot of changes had begun to take place from the glory days of Charlemagne, and we will certainly talk a lot about that. The idea of a united Christian empire, remember, like you have one pope, one church, one emperor, one empire. It's all an idea. And we are struggling, aren't we, in history between ideal and reality. That's when I first fell in love with the Middle Ages, because I found it so fascinating how in the direst of times they always had this neatly laid out system, but with a reality that was somewhat different. She, in fact, is someone for whom I have the greatest of respects, because she questioned the very idea of feudalism. Those of you who have been teachers, and I know many of you have, teaching in the schools, colleges, wherever you go, will find that the idea of feudalism was widely accepted for, well, while most of us were in college before and after. I mean, it was just the way it was. And in 1974, for those in history land, while the rest of the people were leading normal, happy lives, this person, Peggy, as she's known, wrote an article which got us all into a stew. We were all very excited. And it was published in what is for us sort of like the holy scripture of the history world. The American Historical Review said, but that's American history. Oh, no. They take it all, and if you're really important, if you're really big, you get in it. If you're regular, you don't. So we have other journals for the regular folk. So this article in 1974 called The Tyranny of a Construct, and you say, oh my gosh, tyranny? A construct? Yes, feudalism. You know, it's that kind of thing, knocking away those who would challenge it. People, pedagogically speaking, you know, it's that you don't want like it, you want to feel this? You know, to continue with your analogy of brutality, they were knocking down the anti-feudalism people. You know why? Because it's so easy. Just, oh, yeah, of course it's feudalism. Well, what does that mean? Well, in the next few pages, see 1063 to 1088, those were the pages in the AHR, she proceeded in a most interesting way to deconstruct the idea and say it really doesn't mean anything. It's just like a Hoover vacuum cleaner bag. It's just full. And it's like what do you want feudalism to be? And it can be it. You know, that's the problem with isms, isn't it? When you take them apart and say, what does that really mean? You say, well, I don't want to talk about that. I'd just rather just take it and just believe it, have faith. Let's go back to understand, of course, that when we talk about it, it involves a great deal of factors. Let's just go on and explain the idea of feudalism is simply based on an idea of a society that lacks what we would consider to be any kind of systematic government or authority, that it more or less has a society based on local leaders and based on means other than money. People like Brown, as far as that concerned, myself, believe that it has to do with an upper class of nobles and high clergy who run the society. Yes, the mass of people are involved, but only in the fact of supporting it. But they don't have any authority really in it. The feudal element, as we will see then, involves high clergy and nobility, both of which are connected, as we are going to see. The heirs of Charlemagne, had Charlemagne had a situation in which one son after another ruled, it might have worked out for him, but some of you will remember it ends up with 3 grandsons, and they will duke it out. And the natural tendency, as it had been in the days before Charlemagne, was for the different children to take over land, and then they fight amongst themselves for authority. In other words, there's just one Charlemagne and just one Carolingian empire based on him, the man, the legend, the power that he could have on his own. He was not prepared when he died for the Viking invasions from the north, but there you are. His successors would have to deal with this, as they would in the British Isles as well. And the result, of course, is going to be rather constant warfare. Even if they hadn't been fighting among themselves, they would have had to fight off the Vikings. The Vikings there, for a long time, just as raiders, and only later as settlers. In other words, if you weren't already thinking of medieval West as a place of warfare, you are definitely at a stage when it was almost constant. It is a very, very poor world. Your book will describe the growth of population and the improvements in agriculture, and that's all nice. But let's think of the reality. The reality is a world of, well, we used to call it third world. Today, in other words, a world where life is short, nasty, and brutish, right? Isn't that what the philosopher said? And famine is common, terrible diseases. All of this is not what we think of when we would think of the Western Roman Empire, but that, as they say, is history. The West has changed, hasn't it? It's no longer that. It is rural, it is quite dangerous, and it is by no means a world in which, no matter how much you want to romanticize the Middle Ages, and I do, most of us would want to live in. I've told you before, I like privacy, I like cleanliness, and I like comfort, none of which I would find in the Middle Ages. That's my big three. That's my big three. That's not medieval. And I don't care how high up you are. Localism, then. Everything is based on the power that's there. And that's for obvious reasons. They're just not the communication means. The best communications are probably in the church, if you want to know the truth. But that's simply because of the writing and monasteries and so forth. That is, the ones the Vikings left after they destroyed so many. It's a pretty devastated world, if you want to know the truth. And finally, of course, that ties in the church to this, because even though, again, when we talk about ideal versus reality, what could be more idealistic as opposed to reality than the Catholic Church with the Pope at the head, and then the bishops and the abbots, and then all the monks and parish priests, and everybody singing Alleluia together, and you think, oh, well, that's just beautiful. But let's go with the big R, reality. It just doesn't work out that way, and we understand that all of this will tie into the development of a feudal society. Again, maps always give a deceptive unity to the worlds of what had been Carolingian, but you see the big three. The middle one thought he was hot stuff. He would get to be Holy Roman Emperor because he was the oldest. And so he would tell the younger ones, he'd say, all right now, yeah, you know how they are. Say, I'm the oldest, and I'm big, and I'm important. And they would say, yes, sir, big brother. You would have the Western king and the Eastern king. And of course, you can imagine there will be fraternal warfare and struggles, which I won't go into because they're not really connected to our story, except to understand that the late Carolingian period is a period of fighting with each other, fighting against Vikings, and a host of others. If you got anything to fight about, and they had land, they hadn't got much else, but they got a lot of land. And so this leads to natural conflict and fighting. And then, of course, if you get bored up there, just go south, because there's Italy. And there's lots down there of interest, including, of course, the Pope of Rome. That map again will show you Lothair, the middle. And the irony of that, of course, has to do with the fact that you can vaguely in the eastern part see the origins of the Germans, and in the west you can see the origins of the French. And of course, with the middle part, you see the origins of whatever else. You know, it's sort of like it didn't really lead, it just became just sort of a blob in the middle. And it's kind of interesting. You say, what do you mean, Switzerland or Belgium? Not so much, but it just, that particular middle, that's always the thing about being in the middle. You just don't get a lot of credit. And that is the irony of the fact that he would become emperor for a while. Didn't work out for him, though. We've heard this a million times. Again, if we are looking for organization and system, we've got it. And I believe there's even an illustration in the book that shows maybe a clergyman and a knight having a chat with the peasant standing by watching and, of course, not speaking. But guess who gets to be number one? Because closest to the Lord? The clergy, those who pray. Now, who do you think thought this up? I think they did, don't you? You think they were kind of drawing straws to say who could be number one, number two? I don't think so. I think they were pretty sure they were on top. And then the nobles. You say, well, how do you get to be noble? That can be complicated, can't it? Especially as time goes on, you can buy into it. But if you had said that to one of them, you would get some hurt feelings because they considered themselves sort of inborn noble. I was born to be noble, my family, I'm truly. But we realize, of course, that in a more, shall we say, mercenary society, it will be possible to get added on. In a few generations, nobody will know the ugly truth. And of course, as we all know from the French Revolution, the great Third Estate. And as I always like to tell the class, no offense that you're probably one of them. Because, you know, it's kind of hard to get into number one and number two. Number three, you got a welcome wagon. The mat, the doors are open. We are opening it for you. You too can be Third Estate, because I don't care what position you are. If you're not noble or clergy, you've made it to Big Three. And of course, in a simple world, that's going to mean essentially peasants. I said simple, and it will change. But at this particular time, we're trying to keep things ordinary, as this kind of scheme must have been devised by clergy as they tried to think about how did God organize the world to be. And that's the way they saw it. Now, how this fits into our issue of the feudal is going, of course, to deal with 1 and 2. Because, of course, regardless of whether we are talking about clergy or nobles, we are going to talk about fighting. I know, we're supposed to be beating the swords into plowshares, or we're supposed to be on the peace train. I get it. But you understand, we have to defend what belongs to the Lord. Therefore, we are going to have to use the military. That is the theory that everyone really, especially upper clergy, bishops and abbots and so forth, are going to be part of this, and in some cases actually fight themselves. Many of them you are well aware, as in the Song of Roland, right, Kim? Are going to be, as Turpin, are going to be fighting. I don't think they can decide, I want to be a bishop. I love being a bishop. But it's kind of like Clark Kent. You know, it's like you got one role, but then, but I'm also a mild-mannered archbishop, but I'm also a warrior. See, get on that horse and go fight. Because that is the nature of this society. It's a strange society to our eyes. But that is the way they see it, most of them being from the upper families. And let's face it, they are somewhat Christian, but they're a lot German too. And as Germanic peoples, this idea of the upper classes and warfare, it does come naturally. It's not that they were brought up, and I want you to be a pacifist, kid, when you grow up. No. I think they understand their raison d'etre is to fight. And so this whole business of the feudal world will be highly significant. And let's consider the fact as we go that this noble class basically employ people. I keep thinking of that analogy that you brought up of the mafia, because the knights, you know, we always think of knights as being these genteel folk and all of that. But the truth is that I don't think they were such nice fellows, at least in the early stages, that they are essentially hired for their skills as warriors. We'll talk more about that shortly, but the ruling class, the big shots, whether they are bishops, abbots, they are earls, they are counts, dukes, whatever they be, they will have these individuals who fight for them. Now again, we have to always remember truth versus ideal versus reality. The ideal is that, of course, these wonderful knights are pledged by loyalty to their lords. It's beautiful. But we know the truth is they are fighting for any reward. What's in it for me? I should have you up here doing some sort of mafia thing here. Because I know you can. You're quite good. Yes, I mean, because, you know, I get the sense, regardless of how much, you know, of this literature you read, that the truth is many of them are ruffians. As we was, yes, I know it. It's shocking, it's shocking. The whole penguin pelican family of great romantic literature would faint if I said these things, because some of these boys just were not nice fellows. But they were willing to fight. If I were in insurance, I wouldn't take out a life insurance policy on any of them, because they lived fast and died young. And it was exciting. But the fact is, they are essentially the foes. And scholars bring up that to be a warrior became increasingly costly as time went on. Some have said, somebody got a whole article out of writing about the importance of the stirrup. Now, can you imagine that? Yeah. But yes, how expensive it became in terms of your overhead. If you wanted to go to night school, K-N-I-G-H-T, school, yeah. And, you know, and so this would be part maybe of your graduation fees, you know, to get your stirrup training or get your face training. I mean, yeah, you know, they can nickel and dime you. So they were, so your stirrup fees and all that. So yeah, it has really been interesting to me to think about as time went on. You know, first of all, there was just, you became a knight. You just run around and kill folks, I guess, or wound them, or whatever you're going to do, capture them. But then you start thinking, oh, I want a horse, and it'd be nice to have the stirrup. Yeah, and all your equestrian expenses. Remember, it's not just being a bloodthirsty killer. That helps. That helps. That's very helpful. Don't get me wrong. But you got to have your horse. You got to do this and that and the other. Then you got your living expenses. All of this is considered a factor in this growth of a feudal society. And of course, clearly, there is no, after the latter Carolingians fall apart, there is no central government. So government takes on more or less local relationships. There's nothing else there. We have very little documentation. Most of our information of this comes from later writers, because of the lack of administrative sources. Some of you remember we talked a lot about Einhardt's life of Charlemagne and things like that. We don't have nearly as much of that as we would like to, even about little biographies. So most of it is just projecting what was going on. But localism is the case. It's just whatever is going on down home and in the surrounding area. And that means the local ruler, whether he was a duke or a count, those words coming, of course, from the Latin and referring to leaders who had been administrative leaders for Charlemagne or later Carolingians, are going to do just what people have been doing. If somebody's not watching you, you're going to take over. You say, but that's not right. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just people. So folks can be bad. We're talking usurpation. I love that word. They are usurpers, the big U. Yeah. They say, we'll just take all that over. You say, but that's not yours. You gonna do something about it? How did I sound? Did I sound scary? Yeah. I was fairly intimidating myself. Yes, it's that idea, though, of usurping all the authority. So in many ways, the dukes and counts, people of that sort, they used to be local officials. They made themselves the local rulers because there's nobody to tell them, don't do it. You can't do that. Normandy. Many of you been there? Lucky people. Have you all been there? Oh, yeah, it's really nice, isn't it? I guess there's still some who remember 1944. So, but Normandy, the land of the Norse, becomes, so they say, the first place where this feudal society grows up. What was the province of Normandy, which since the French Revolution has been divided up into departments? I simply call Normandy for convenience. But just so that you know, this is one aspect of Norman history that I find particularly interesting. It means that the Normans were ingenious enough to develop what was more or less a systemized way of military service and the development of some kind of government. Some kind of government. And that, of course, we call feudal. And you'll notice that our concept, and remember when you learned this in school, the famous feudal pyramid. Yes, who can ever forget it? When Miss Grundy would do it up on the board, when you say, oh, Miss Grundy, I didn't know, it's so neat, it's so orderly. And who are the ones at the bottom? At the last hand? Oh, those are peasants. And you say, gosh, there must have been a lot of them. Yeah, but I mean, you watch it and it's so beautiful. And you say, gosh, I love the Middle Ages. It's just, everybody knows where everybody should be. It's beautiful. And I'm sure if Miss Grundy were here to defend herself, she would say, but I thought I was doing a good job for my students. I thought this made it easy. Yes, it does, Miss Grundy. But is this truly a help to make people think that it was easy? Because it really wasn't. Yes, it is true that I'm trying to explain it in a way that makes it seem somewhat easier, but you will understand that politically and militarily we're going to develop all kinds of connections and relationships that will create fields of law just to deal with all connections. Churches, relationships of clergy and laity, and a host of other issues in the time forward. First of all, from the Latin word for fief or land or whatever you might say, we do talk about fiefdom, and that means fief, F-I-E-F, not fife, fief. I used to get that. It's worse than pheasant for peasants. You know, have you ever gotten, but yes. So, fiefs, a fief and a vassal. The idea, of course, in the feudal world is when this big, rugged fella that looks like he likes to hurt people, and you're interviewing him for a post, and he said, yeah, what kind of compensation am I going to get? He's not asking for dental care or any other kind of benefits. He's not worried. So you can knock that one out. But what he is looking at is land. And the reason is because that's all we've got. You know, you say, well, you can just give him money. Well, no, there's no money. We've got all this land, and now you can have it. And you can hold it from me as long as you fight for me. And when you stop fighting for me, like the shall the insurance policies, when you retire or die, whichever comes first, then I get the land back. See? Probably you're going to die, but don't mention that. Let's just say you're holding the land. You say, well, he hasn't got time to farm. He's going to be out fighting and trying to hurt people. I know, that's why we have peasants. All right, our thief comes equipped. You know, I feel like somebody on The Price is Right, you know, like, and peasants, they will be there. See, they come a part of the whole operation. Peasant loaded. So it's not like, well, you better get out there and start plowing. You, as a holder of the fief, then, are a fighter. So that's the idea. And for that, you do the military service. So that's how it started. It combined sort of land possession. And I want to be careful that you don't give it except for your time of military service. You don't have land tenure. It's like, you're moving on, bud. You're off that land. You're not fighting anymore. You say, yeah, I'm into the peace movement now. Well, then get that van and start moving, bud, because we don't want any like you. Now, secondly, we understand that this system, or system if you want to call it that, is going gradually to develop from Normandy. So it said, from Normandy into England, and we can figure that one out, can't we? Norman conquest in the 11th century. Other parts of France will imitate it. And the emperor, the famous, the great emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, will in fact utilize those traditions to help build his own imperial authority. But you know what? It's not everywhere. You can't go anywhere in medieval Europe and says, I want to see something feudal. What's going on feudal around here? And they go, qua? I mean, it's like you can't, it's not uniform. And that's always the problem, because I will hear people say, in my dreams at least, somebody say, oh, that's so feudal, I want them to say it so I can tear them up about it. Like, because they don't really get it, that's a feudal idea, or something like that. Say, what are you talking about? And really, we just use that, throw that word out, meaning anything, I guess, that's old or out of date. But the truth of the matter is that only in certain areas where you have the combining of the various ideas, military, political, and frankly, ecclesiastical, will you have this feudal tradition. The king is known by the French term of suzerain, again with your idea of the Great Pyramid, because he is the Lord of Lords. So he gives out the vassals their fiefs, meaning Normandy or Brittany or Aquitaine or any of the other great lands of France. And you say, well, I wonder how those great nobles, well, they sort of acknowledge it, but then they don't really want him to bother them too much. You know what I mean? It's all nice on paper or in their minds. Yeah, you're king, you're the suzerain. But again, it's nicer on paper than it is in reality. At the same time, whatever the Lord, whether he's the king, whether he is a duke, whether he is any kind of noble, he can have warriors, and they are vassals. Does that sound complicated? It gets worse, a lot worse. Because vassals have fiefs and they have to do military service, and it gets increasingly complicated. As the book will point out to you, population is growing. There are new opportunities for military service. Let's not forget, the Crusades are coming to a civilization near you. And so, I mean, you want opportunities, we can give them to you for you young vassals. It's coming. Oh, and here it is. I know. It's beautiful, isn't it? There's your pyramid. How many high schools? How many blackboards? And youth, innocent teenagers, have been exposed to this and said, wow, so that was the way the Middle Ages was. No. But they thought, but they were corrupted as mere children. But I mean, it looked beautiful if it had just worked. Like so much, I suspect, that is medieval, the pyramid is merely not so much an ideal as an oversimplification of a society and a way to get everybody in a place. I guess when you're trying to sort everybody out, I like to do that. You know, you want everything to be in place unless you prefer to let things go. But if you like things, you like them in their place. And I think whoever thought this up, the feudal pyramid, definitely had the idea. And it could have been a nice clergyman, so I don't want to get in trouble. I mean, you know, thought, well, let's put them here and here, and everybody has a role. And you see who's on the bottom. Oh, I know you're surprised. They would always say, but peasants feed us. So they are like, they keep us going. They're like feet. Dr. Scholl loves feet too. And I mean, the foot is a very important thing. But obviously, most of us do not ennoble it. There's a reason we call dukes and counts nobles, right? And these aren't that. Now, what's wrong, of course, with the clergy is this. We've got the Archbishop of Chicago, the Cardinal maybe, Your Eminence. And then we have poor Father O'Malley, who's got some little old church and a few folks. And you say, he's not no big deal. You're right. But he's a clergyman, so look where he gets on the triangle. I'm not so sure about that. I'm not sure if His Eminence would invite Father O'Malley over for a social event. Because you know who I think His Eminence is? The son of a nobleman. You know who I think Father O'Malley is? I think he's the son of a peasant. You mean you believe there are those class distinctions? Yes, I do, with all my heart. But don't Father O'Malley, can't he make it big time? No, he needs to stay where he is, right in his place in the triangle, okay? But there's all these different categories, which I think is very significant and very important. Now, medieval people love rituals. At least that's what the churchman who wrote this stuff said. So, you know, that's what's always funny. Ask for any lay accounts of these events and you'll come up short, because laymen are not too much into the writing, they just into the doing. So we have to wait for the clergy to write it all down. And you say, well, how true is it? Kind of true, wouldn't you think? I think they probably idealize much of this because when you read things like this, you wonder, don't you, or I do, how do we know that everybody did this? Was there some big book of feudalism and you would get blackballed if you didn't do this? I don't know that. I sort of doubt it, though. But I think these are the general standards that were accepted. Homage, from the Latin meaning man. One man says, I pledge my loyalty to you. I will serve you. And that is followed by an oath of fealty in the name of the Holy Trinity, which will have the religious aspects. I will be faithful, so help me God. You say, wow. So you mean if he doesn't do that, it's the big P? Yes. Perjury. Damn you. Yes, it could be bad. Oh, it can be bad. You're not going for a few weeks. You're going to hell. Yeah. Perjurer. Yeah, we don't. And then, a symbol of the thief, maybe a little clod of earth. And then a little peck, cheek peck. And you say, wow, I feel so warm right now. Sometime when we touch, it's that kind of thing. And you say, really? Well, that's what they say anyway. This is supposed to be the Lord and vassal relationship, up close, personal, and ritualized. And there we will begin, because now you're having your break. So break. Whatever. 5 minutes, 4.5 now. All right. Now, if we continue to go by theory, and I want us to go by theory because we think about in the feudal world and the books that explain how this is in theory, we will see, of course, that lords have their vassals and the lords care for their vassals because at first they are sort of like, I would think, naughty boys in a reformatory, but I guess over time these knights they're warriors, but they're also part of our extended family, and we care a great deal about them. We really do. We want you to like your fief and stay with us and so forth. So, in exchange for that, the vassals are supposed to fight for them, and then the aid and counsel, which is kind of interesting since this entails providing hospitality if the Lord and the extended family come to visit. You heard of eating out of house and home? We've known those people, yeah. And you can't tell the Lord, well, we're running right low on supplies, because that would be rude. Yeah. And that would hurt the feelings. So supposedly people did this as a way of destroying or hurting overpowerful vassals. That's an interesting concept, though, of that kind of hospitality. Aid and counsel, more or less the idea of if you're going to make a big decision, if you're the Lord, you should seek the advice of your vassals. And you can see how this makes them into some sort of advisory body. You don't want to dramatize it, but it does have lots of potential for being both useful and at the same time being difficult, because you know how folks are. So they get in there, and he says, you know, I was thinking about having a war with Brittany. What do you all think? And Lord, everybody's going to think something different, and they don't mind telling you. And then you're kind of sorry you asked them, aren't you? He said, now see, then you're going to take a vote, so many we's and so many no. I don't know. But the fact is that it can create lots of dissent. In some cases, by the 12th century, we hear about the device of scutage, which is very interesting because some of you probably heard of this in the American Civil War. You could pay and avoid fighting. In this case, and by the 12th century, some rulers might have preferred the scutage because they preferred to hire mercenaries than to use their actual vassals. Interesting idea, but it's just one more element that evolves, because you think a vassal is there to fight, so why is he paying the scutage? Well, because, as we're going to see, it continues to get complex. You're sometimes fighting offensively, and sometimes you're fighting defensively. So if you're fighting defensively, as in someone attacks your lord's land, that is obligatory military service. However, it's supposed to be 40 days. And you say, you think they're really counting up their days? Well, because they have other obligations. The vassal, he may be like super vassal, or ratemyvassal.com, and everybody's saying, oh, he's a great vassal. And then he gets another fief. And you say, you mean these people are greedy? Yes, I'm sorry to have to tell you. Yes. Many of them say, I want this and want that. Well, how many days can you fight? Well, 6 days a week. And then maybe take off a few religious holidays, but otherwise, our fighting may be limited. So 40 days of offensive, and then technically you're supposed to fight for your Lord in defensive, or at least provide one of your vassals. A vassal may have vassals. Have you ever thought about that? It gets complicated, doesn't it? It really, really does, because the longer some of these vassals go on, they just acquire more fiefs. And if they play their cards right, then they start hiring people for their own purposes. So yeah, it is definitely dynamic in nature. Now, one problem will develop with what we might call the heredity of fiefs, because it will not be long before these vassals are going to want to pass it on. Maybe the early vassals were just bad boys, but after a time, they tell us that many of the sort of professional warriors may have decided, they got married, they want to settle down. Honey, I want you to come to my fief and see my lands. I'm real proud of it. And the next thing you know, they settle down, and Junior and Sis are there on the fief. And you're thinking, gosh, if you got all that, won't little vassal, won't he want this someday? Son, this is all going to be yours someday. That, all of that. It's amazing when you think about that idea of heredity of fiefs. And I don't know if it was the vassal union that got together that pulled this off, because I've often said, you know those lords didn't want to do this. You know they probably didn't say, oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm delighted to be able to pass on these fiefs to your children. I love you. You have a lovely family. I just don't believe that. I think they would have preferred to keep it far more open and see, maybe your children work out. You might not have a ruffian kid. I mean, you don't have anybody who's mean and wants to beat up people, you know? So you should be out. But that is the idea then, the right of passing on the land to an heir if the heir is capable of performing the military tasks. That, of course, is going to be very important. So we are told. So we've got a variety of vassals who hold land sometimes from different lords. And remember, these lords may be either lay or ecclesiastical. And you don't know who the ecclesiastical lord may be, because those positions change hands. Technically, the lord can pass on everything to his son, right? But not an ecclesiastical lord. You see, if an ecclesiastical lord has a son, you know what we call it? A boo-boo. Because, yeah, well, yes, the B word. But, and I mean, he's a nice little bastard. That's not it, though. But he just legally can't inherit the property. And, you know, Daddy loves you very much, and I'd love for you to be a bishop someday. But you just can't hold lands in the legal system as it was set up at that point. And the great thing as far as the Middle Ages is concerned is that meant that these fiefs tended to pass from this person to that person rather than go to certain families. But churchmen are very, very definitely, because they too possess masses of land. Remember, the church has what we call mort main, dead hand. Once the church gets land, it keeps it. Okay? Until the French Revolution. Because the idea being that it's ours. Well, I mean, God's. But we are looking after it for God. Remember that, okay? We're just working it, so you just keep your cotton picking hands off it, okay? Just remember, we're in charge. You say, could this bring people to court? Oh my goodness. As we develop courts, whether they are lay courts or church courts, it can develop all kinds of situations, legitimizing illegitimate children, or other issues of possession of lands, as far as cases in which individuals claim to be the rightful heir. The issues are manifold. And you can think of many yourself just in life, all the situations that may develop. To complicate things again will be the idea of how the church as an institution reacts to this. Because beginning, with the Holy Roman Emperor, one of the most famous, Otto I, we're going to see more and more of the bishops as being royal servants. And I'm using those words advisedly. And you say, but what about the Pope? Well, the Pope's nice, but Otto it's God, and he's here. and then alto, and the Pope's kind of here. And you go, well, aren't they kind of equal? Well, sort of. But alto's a little more equal than the Pope. And all of this is to say that then we're going to have issues, I think, of the clergy are going to hold all kinds of lands from the king, and sometimes there will be children and succession issues, which will be very, very interesting, I think, because, as I note there, many of the bishops are not going to be bishops or even abbots because they got this piety test and aced it, you know? And they said, wow, you know those prayers. I have never seen the Ave Maria sung more beautifully than you did that. You know, 5 stars. No, no, no. These people often are the younger sons because the nobles want to keep their lands together. And you know what you tell the younger one? You say, you know, God has been good to us, and we want to share you with God. And you're going into the church. And, you know, at first the kids are going, oh, gee, Dad, do I have to? You know, I really had looked forward to a secular life. And you say, well, maybe, you know, long weekends or something you can take off. But overtly, you're going to be a bishop. And you say many of them may not have had the interests of the Lord as their primary goal. Yes, to put it mildly. So that is going to be a problem. To be a problem in the church. Of course, there are going to be some who are quite devout and devoted to church interests, but others, let's say, their hands are, shall we say, both in church and lay interests. And by the 11th century, there will be leadership who will say this needs to stop. And when they say that, we're going to have trouble. We're going to have big trouble. Jen?
I'm wondering, when they gave like a fiefdom to a vassal, was there a certain size of the land or a standard of measure, or
Not
just
necessarily.
whatever you wanted?
Oh, no, whatever you wanted. I mean, whatever the Lord said it was.
I mean, it could be 1 acre or 10 acres?
Yes, precisely. And we're going to get to something called a manor, M-A-N-O-R, and there might be several manors on a fief, or a fief could be small and there could be several fiefs on one manor. You know, it'd be nice if it were neat and clean, and we could, I know it because it never works like we would like it to, but somehow we do know that it must have provided some amount of wealth for these people to be able to fight and maintain their expenses. Now, we mentioned the king or suzerain, and technically, and some kings pull this off, tried to make every warrior say, yes, I love my local lord, but you know who I love the biggest and best? You. And that's going to be a tough one. It's like you have your lord, you know, lord vassal, but you're not the big L. See, the big lord is the king. And the king would like it to be that way, so that if your lord wants to go to war with me, you know what you're going to have to say to your lord? You're a loser. I hate you, and I thought I loved you. But you were ugly to the king. Yeah. You're a perjurer. Okay. Damn you. Okay, so, you know, a lot of harsh language here, as you can see. But you can see the idea then that if you take all these ceremonies seriously, you have this level of fidelity. And that's why we have what's called liege homage. If you can't even imagine, I love all my lords. Every time I get a fief, I get a new lord. And I love them all. There's nothing like the love of a lord. but then you start saying, I love, but where does the love stop? Is there any limit? Yes, there is. Legally speaking, they call it liege homage. Boy, you can imagine all in feudal law, when they get to talk about that, I loved him, but I loved him more. And so when they had a war, I sent somebody to fight for him because I had liege homage with him. And since we fight, you're not, I mean, that's just normal to fight, so you're not going to go, oh, peace in our time. No, I mean, that would seem kind of silly, wouldn't it? Because, I mean, this is not the Pacifist Association, so we're not looking for the peace train. We are looking to fight, but liege homage means you're going to provide the other lord with support, but then you can fight for that for whom you have liege homage.
Kill your support.
Yeah, yeah. But it's all in a nice way. You use that killing word like it's bad, but this is nice killing. We didn't mean anything ugly. It was all among friends, okay? Okay? So I think I just have this whole cult of manhood and fighting and so forth. I can't imagine that they're, oh yeah, I want to do it. So these are not mafia. These are Christian gentlemen. Thank you very much. Okay then. Now, if your lord dies or retires, whichever comes first, then there is a new lord and you have to do homage again, which I think is kind of interesting because of the factor that's called the heritability of fiefs. Whenever there's a change in vassal or lord, we got to do another ceremony. Can you imagine the level of ceremonies that would be going on when we think of this? And again, it's hard to know how seriously this was taken and whether people would say, I want to get to it, but can we get together next month? I've got a war here. We're going to the Holy Land to fight. Let me just get that down and we'll see if it works out. Because there's the most interesting, you'll remember this during the 100 Years' War when you have the three kings of Philip IV, the three sons of Philip IV. And each one dies before the English king can get around to doing that. And, you know, he's got it on the list of to do. You know, but he wants to, but yeah. So they just don't live long enough. So every time you're supposed to do the fealty and homage. Again, we ask ourselves about how much of this is theory and how much is reality. I guess we'll never know. But they did have a solution to most problems. One, I think, is like an installment fee. I mean, it's like once you get your fee, you have to pay a sort of fee. It's called relief. It's like whoever had the fee has died and you're ready to take it. And this can be difficult. And then they say, okay, you don't have the funds right now. You know what you can do? Installment plan. Yeah, in the installment. You can go on and take possession, and over time, you can get this covered in a few easy payments. So I'm not sure how easy it was, And I'm not sure how seriously all this was done. But relief is one more way of trying to jack something, I guess, out of people involved in this system. And again, it's not always money. We always have to remember that we are talking about a landed society that has much to do with the value of animals and crops and so forth. But it's easier, I guess, to think sometimes of relief as being monetary, and it may have been later on. And then there is the matter of what they call AIDS. And again, this is just like providing signs of our love. You really care for me, don't you, Vassal? She says, yes, sir. I just could not. I mean, I just dream of that at night. That's how wonderful you are. Are you willing to show your love? Yes, sir. With 3 A's. The first being a special gift at the time. Yeah, special gift at the time of the knighting of the eldest son, in case you're fruitful. We don't want to, we're cutting it off at 1, okay? Because again, if I can pull out my big wad of money, you think, how long will this go? And you think, well, you got the eldest son. And then you've got, and some of you know about expenses of receptions. Have you ever had daughters who've been married? And you say, well, no, we had a discount reception and it was very economical. I doubt that. I'm just saying. And again, the eldest daughter's marriage. And then that's an aid. And so you're giving out this money, and it's kind of like you tip here, tip there. And we love gratuity. I know, see, this is, yeah. Yeah, that's about it. And all of this is to say that the aids for ransom of the Lord are supposed to be one time and one time only. If you want another aid, we get to vote on that. And you say, well, I don't know about that. What if you're mad at me? You say, yeah, that could be a problem. Well, you better not be asking for money then, huh? These aids then are, interestingly, they're customary.
Give them the money.
Well, an aid, I mean, some support, whether it's money, it might be a heifer. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, again, you don't think about it. But yeah, those are gifts. And you're expected. I mean, it's not like you have a choice like, why, I just can't believe it. This is so beautiful. I just hate to open this. No. No, we're going to get those. Those are expected. So it's not like, I can't believe this. This is so nice. No. This was mine. Those are the 3 times. And then others are considered extraordinary aids. And again, gosh, I didn't realize I've got a cost overrun on that war I'm having. Could y'all chip in a special fund just to show how much you love me? I'll step out of the room and you can take a vote. You can imagine. I wonder, what if they had said, I'm sorry, we think you're a loser. And nobody wants to contribute. Gosh, could you imagine how down you were if you were a Lord and folks talked to you? Yeah, that would hurt. But the aids that's an interesting concept. And again, it's an interesting idea about the marriage of the eldest daughter and the knighting of the eldest son. Because the knighting is like, God, bar mitzvah. And then you help pay for the or the band, and you, and all those activities. Yes, imagine the caterer's bill and all that, open bar. And can you imagine all those assel daddies, how much they can knock down If you had an open bar, yeah. So you don't even want to think about, because none of them are spirit-free. No. So, no, they're not trying to stay sober for the next war. They are knocking them back, especially if somebody else is paying for it. That's what I've heard anyway. So, it is legal. That relationship is supposed to be based on love and respect, yeah. But it's also by law. And if you break it, that makes you, oh, I've got a good word. It makes you, and try this out at your next party, contumacious. Yeah, call one of your buddies contumacious and see how she reacts. She say, you're so contumacious. Because contumacious means that she knew what the rules were. She has contumacity. Whew. Yeah. Well, I hope not too. You could ruin our whole feudal world. Yeah, you people. The idea, though, of contumacious vassal means that if you don't fulfill your responsibilities as a vassal, then you're contumacious, and then you know what we do? You lose the fief. And worse than that, any symbol of our bond. Yeah. The candle of love, it is blown out. And quite a bit in the ritual is based on this sort of one-on-one relationship. So if you are perfidious, nay, contumacious, then there is trouble in the beauty of our relationship. However, there's also what's called diffidatio, meaning that I was not contumacious. You were an evil lord. And so you know what I'm going to do? We're going to fight over it. You will defy him, and he and the other vassals will then come and attack you. Maybe you've got a low month. There's not a lot of wars going on. So you think, gosh, don't they have enough trouble? No, they can make plenty on their own. Diffidatio then comes about when, in essence, you do not accept the confiscation of your fief. So you're fighting back. And otherwise, you, of course, I guess, you just get the moving van to come on and get your stuff, and you would say, this has been real. Those have been great years here on the fief, but I'm leaving now. Now, I don't think many people would do that, do you? I think they would stay right there and fight. So, there is a lot of, shall we say, contention in the upper class. Escheat is another issue because the inheritance may not come about due to the fact there's not a suitable heir for the fief. Okay, that happens. Usually, if, say, the knight has all daughters, probably one of the husbands of the daughters will try to cash in and try to get the father-in-law's fiefs. We'll see if that goes. Sometimes, but otherwise, if the Lord chooses not to be cooperative, then we have, and I think this is still a legal term, escheat, meaning simply it reverts back to the Lord for reassignment. But I'm not thinking that's going to happen without a lot of folks being unhappy about it. And so, you know, if you're unhappy, let's fight. Let's have a war. So again, this keeps this society quite volatile if we want to think about it militarily speaking, and not a lot of time to work on more progressive issues such as how do we improve the economy, how do we grow more food, how do we make for a better world for the peasantry, how do we develop our cities and our relationships with Byzantines, those Orthodox, yuck, and Muslims. Well, you'll have to come back next week and we will see how all of this is going to work out. Thank you, thank you. Appreciate you coming.
How do they keep up with the fast?
How do they what?